Whoa. Hi, guys. Give me a second here. Hi, everybody. I'm back again. Am I? Okay. Hi, YouTube. I'm sorry. You guys really get the blunt. I don't know. I don't know what it is, but YouTube does not always play friendly. Anyway, thank you, everybody, for tuning in. And welcome to the final installment of Deputy and the Gifts. I hope everyone has a nice beverage and it's all nice and cozy. Although as cozy as you're going to get on a nice sunny day like that. Well, where I am anyway. It might be horrible where you are, in which case, get cozy. Or maybe you're watching this later, in which case, hopefully you're able to just get comfortable, pull up a chair, get a beverage, and I'm going to be reading us last 5 chapters. And then I'll talk about it a bit because I think I have feelings and I want to make them known because I'm going to be having to do some work on this afterwards, obviously. I mean, you already know when there's well, I'm trying to show you the page right then. There's maybe 1 or 2 pages for many of these chapters. So obviously there's just not a lot there and it needs to be expanded on a little bit. I think this might be a novella rather than a full-fledged novel, but still worth the effort for sure. So far I'm having a good time with it. I'm really appreciating it. And yeah, so without further ado, because I have a lot to get through tonight, I will bring you the next chapter. Just also a quick warning that I am going to be editing, so my head will be down sometimes, and I'll be you might hear pen scraping. You may also hear children in the background. That is from outside. We have free-range children in our neighborhood, so they might, and it's a beautiful day out, so they are enjoying the beautiful weather. As well they should. Okay, so without further ado, chapter 24. The first cries of alarm were coming from the bandit pack when 2 more arrows struck, and 2 more bandits went down. Shouts of alarm came from the other bandits, and one cast a spear at the bush where Ethan and Glass were leaping into their saddles. The spear clattered among the branches, then fell aside. The sounds from the bandits were more of confusion than pursuit, as the 2 set off at a gallop. They did not gallop for very long, and when they slowed, they listened carefully, but could hear nothing from behind. I think they will not be after us immediately, said Glass. It seemed that Oric was already having some trouble keeping them on the trail, and with him down, they will be spending a little time deciding who is now in charge. Very likely so, agreed Ethan. It depends now on who takes the lead. He may indeed wish to continue to chase us, but will he be able to make the others follow him? In the meantime, we had best catch up with Tywell before dark. But dusk was rapidly falling by the time they came up with the rest. In fact, it was so dim that one of the young men turned and drew his sword at their approach, raising it for a blow. Easy now, warned Glass. It's only us. Have a care with the steel. The band stopped and began gathering around them with 100 questions at once. Ethan called them to order. Moel was not with them, but we killed the leader of the pursuit. We hope the rest will decide to call off the chase. That is in no way certain. We will go to the place where we have already decided to camp. Come, we cannot afford to sit here much longer. When they had made their camp that night, Tywell approached Ethan. When the deputy looked up, he could see that the younger man was concerned about something, and perhaps a little diffident about bringing it up. Deputy? Yes. Deputy, he trailed off, then started again in a firmer tone. Deputy, the horses are almost done. If we keep riding tomorrow, I think we will lose 2 or 3 of them by the end of the day. They must be given a rest. Ethan nodded seriously. You are right. Sorry, you are quite right. I hope that today's ambush has discouraged the bandits, and if it has, we will all have a rest. Their horses can take more of this treatment than ours can, because they've had better feed and quarters. If they keep coming, we will be in trouble. Ethan nodded. Thank you, Tywell. I know of the difficulty with our horses, and I am pleased that you have not missed it either. I do indeed have a plan in case they still follow. Raj, who happened to be in the next place over, spoke up. I think I might be able to do a thing to discourage them. If I am careful, I might be able to send a few visions among them to shake their nerves, most especially since we're all so near the hills. Ethan looked at him. Do so then. Do you need anything in particular? Only a seat at the fire and some quiet, that I might not be distracted until I have well begun. He spent some time settling himself, then was deep in concentration. All the men hushed and remained silent, talking in whispers. Raj closed his eyes, but began a faint chanting, so faint that none of the others could make out the words. All they could tell was that if they listened too close, a feeling of dread came over them. Those sitting nearest to him gradually shifted their seats to a little farther away. Hmm. Hmm. And all of them cast uneasy glances at him from time to time. At last the magician sat upright and looked around. He smiled, a little faintly, then spoke. Could someone pass me a bite of food and a little bit of drink? It has been a hard work, this. The next morning, finding that the pursuit had ceased, they sought out a place to stay. Ethan had expected that their raid on the town would result in a long pursuit, and had therefore ensured that all their equipment was carefully stored. They had brought it away from their previous camp and hidden it as carefully as they could. Now, in order to set up a camp which was at least moderately comfortable, they had to recover it. We will now have to be even more careful for the next few days. Moel is enraged, and may well send out a party with a new leader. In that case, his best move would be to follow the trail we followed from the camp to the town, hoping that we will go back there. Until we have snow to cover our tracks, we're going to have to we're going to have to keep careful watch over where we camp. All through the rest of the week, they moved warily, and whether it was the care they took or simply Moel's decision not to pursue the matter, they were not discovered. When next they met with her, she had 6 men with her, 5 young men, a grizzled older man with eyes as hard as 2 flints. Ethan surveyed the group. So you would all join us? Why? He looked at them one at a time, and each told tales of petty annoyances building into grievances which could not be ignored. The older man looked into Ethan's eyes and said, quietly, it was my woman, you see. One of Moel's men took a fancy to her, and waited until I was elsewhere. When words did not get him what he wanted, he used force. I arrived home and found her dead, and knew what had happened. I knew who had done it, too, for he had been hanging out about for some time. I went to seek him out, but one of these lads hit me on the head before I could get far. When I awoke, they explained that they were going off to join you, and that if I came along, I might get more and better vengeance than by merely going in and issuing a challenge, which would likely get answered by a lot of bandits jumping up and killing me. So I came along, and here I am. Ethan nodded. If all goes well, you'll have your vengeance. But there must be no riding off on a hunt of your own. We must all work together, and to orders, if we are to survive at all. One man acting without thought may get us all killed. Can you hold to that, all of you, no matter what comes? They muttered assent, though Ethan knew that none of them really knew what it was they were agreeing to. In the days to come, they would all find what they had agreed to, whether they had the strength of purpose to hold it, and whether they had the strength of purpose to and whether they had the strength of purpose to hold it. So, let us ride. The next few days were stormy, followed by a period of intense cold. During the clear cold time, they spent much of their excuse me. During the clear cold time, they spent much of their time making their shelters a little more windproof and their quarters a slightly more comfortable. At one point, Tywell approached Ethan. Is it safe for us to remain here, deputy? Are we not vulnerable if Moel should come out or send men after us? Ethan smiled. Would you like to be riding the countryside in such cold? Sorry. What it originally says is Tywell misunderstood. Um, yeah. Mm. No, but if the hunt comes after us, we might be taken by surprise if we remain here. But think, Tywell, you do not wish to ride in this weather, and Moel's men have have as little wish, or even less to do so. It would be surprising if Moel can force his men to go out of doors during these days, let alone go riding off on a long, possibly fruitless, certainly dangerous search. Besides, the snow's covered our tracks, and it will be difficult, if not impossible, for them to find us. So let us enjoy the rest we will have, and make sure that we do have sentries out just in case. It was during the last of the cold days that dissatisfaction began to show itself, finally coming to a head one night around the fire. Glass spoke up first. Deputy, we've been hearing that Moel has been gathering more men to his banner. We've been here in the wilds for so long, making occasional raids, being a nuisance, but the result is not what we intended. The bandit still holds his court in our town, and if he holds out until spring and sends the king his taxes, he will not be dislodged. Something must be done. Ethan nodded, feeling what was coming. Yes, something must be done. If I'm not mistaken, you have an idea as to what must be done? We have. We feel that we have been too long skulking out here. Occasionally, doing something to bring ourselves to the notice of Moel and his men. What we wish to do is make a real attack, to descend on the town by surprise and fight them. If our surprise succeeds, we may well be able to defeat them before they are ready for us. Or we may be destroyed before the fight is over, Ethan replied. We're heavily outnumbered, and if such an attack is not a complete surprise, they may well rally to fight us. If they are not demoralized at the start, we would be in a very bad way. At least we'd die doing something, rather than dribble all our time away in futile efforts until at last Moel is declared our baron, and we're declared outlaws for fighting him. There was a mutter of assent around the fire, and Nathan knew that he dared not simply forbid such a move, or half the band would go off and try to carry out this attack by themselves, which would be a total disaster. He nodded. I fear that if I tell you no, some of you will go off by yourselves, and likely get all of us killed. So let me put it to you in another fashion. We will go, but we will do it according to my plan and in my fashion. Will that satisfy you? Glass hesitated a moment. Then his manner became firm. We can promise nothing at all until we hear what your plan is. Tell us your plan, and we will decide. Warning himself to be careful how he put his plan, Ethan began. The thought of a surprise attack on the bandits is a good one. For a band of our size to attempt to fight them in any other way is lunacy. It might even be even better if we could strike first to remove Moel, to take away their leadership. In the time between his death and the decision as to who, if anyone, is the new leader, we might well do severe damage, to the point of destroying them as a band. If we can remove Moel from the fight, we might even be able to convince the citizenry to rise up and join us. Does that suit your purpose? Glass looked around at the others, surveying their faces, then turned back to the deputy. Yes, I think that will be satisfactory. But if you believe this plan could work, why did we not try it long ago, rather than wait until now? Because this plan is a plan of desperation, and if we fail in this attempt, we are likely all be dead, or at least so badly beaten that we cannot be a threat to Moel any longer. At present, it seems unlikely that we can succeed with our previous plan, and it is a time for desperation, for risks. He looked around at all the faces around him. Make no mistake, any of you, this is a matter of risk, simply by a matter of the numbers against us. About half of us are certain to die in this attempt, even if we win. Are you determined to do this? There was a hesitation, then a mutter of assent, and a bobbing of heads. So be it. Now to specifics. It is going to be necessary for someone to lie in wait in sight of the town, to strike down Moel as soon as he shows himself. I will do that part myself. We must then arrange a signal that will tell the rest to attack. Your pardon, deputy, but might it not be better to provide some form of diversion which would draw Moel out into the open to see it, and thus allow you to have a good shot at him? Ethan grinned. Yes, it might be necessary. However, I would leave that to the last. If we alarm Moel, he might send word to gather his troops before he goes outside. And if they are gathered and ready to fight, then killing Moel will not be enough of a discouragement to them. If we wait for a good while, and Moel does not show himself, then I will see to drawing him out. Now, where do we wait? Dun, dun, dun. Okay. Chapter 25. Ethan shivered. It was still cold, though not so cold as it had been, and he was too well aware of the vulnerability of his position. He was crouched in a clump of willows along the road leading into the town, a position where he could see the length of the town's main street. It was along here, if anywhere, that he would have a clear shot at Moelle. Beside him was a pile of fist-sized stones, and in his belt pouch, ready to his left hand, was the rod of strength. His men, hidden over a ridge behind him and off to the left, were waiting for his signal. He had considered using his bow, but the weather had turned a little warmer and therefore more damp. He could not trust such an important task to a bowstring, which might be slackened by the wet by the time he saw his target. He had not told his men of his intention to use the rod, knowing their feelings of the people of the hills. Uncertainty in any of their minds was something they could not afford in this undertaking. They'd carefully taken their positions a little before sunup, not following the road unless an early patrol come out, find their tracks where they turned off, and raise the alarm. Sorry, I'm not sure. It's one of those times where you have weird words. I just need to confirm that the weird word is real. They had heard the sound of such an early patrol setting out earlier, saw vaguely in the half-light the shapes of riders leaving from the other end of town. Ethan hoped fervently that Tywell would realize such a group would likely ride out and circle the town, and hoped that the young man would be keeping watch for them, in case their hiding place was not quite so good as they thought. Ethan was also wearing the shoes. Whether it was a case of running from the bandits after throwing stones at Moelle, or merely to get into town more quickly and cause more consternation, he wished to move fast. He considered the notion of casting a few stones into the town simply to cause some noise to draw Moelle out, but as he told the men, this was a stratagem for desperation. The temper of his men had already told him that if this attempt did not succeed, he would be unlikely to hold them together for another. If it did appear that Moelle must be drawn outside, then he would try to do so. Otherwise, he would wait as patiently as possible. Suddenly, there was a movement in the town, people surging out of doors. He scanned the group, but Moelle was not among them. What was going on? It seemed that Sayer the carpenter was expostulating with someone else, a farmer from the look of him. Nor was the farmer remaining silent. There was the usual crowd of watchers enjoying the spectacle, though they were too far away to be heard. Ethan could only guess at what was being said. It was an argument over work done, whether or not it was worth the agreed price. Ethan smiled to himself, partly over the spectacle, partly because if the quarrel went on much longer, it may well draw Moelle outside, allowing Ethan to do what he'd come here to do. He watched carefully, noting each person who came on the scene, but Moelle remained inside. When he heard the sound of hooves behind him, it was already too late. He stood and turned in one movement, seeing 5 mounted bandits bearing down on him. His one chance would be to dodge through them, using the speed of the shoes. He ran straight toward the man in the center, saw the consternation grow suddenly in his face, then swerved to the man's right. The bandit swung a sort of wild-handed swing at him as he went by. Ethan ducked, but the blade rang against the back of his helmet. He was on his hands and knees in the snow, head still ringing. The bandits were all around him. He got up and then he heard a voice say, "Don't kill him! Moel will want to talk to him first." Another blow fell on his helmet, and he went down again. He tried to get up, but a foot caught him on the side of the head, and darkness descended on him. Well, this is chapter 25. Can I hope that maybe this story ends? I'll feel really badly if the story doesn't have an ending. 26, 27, 28. I've got 3 chapters, and it's not looking good for our hero. I'm going to have some coffee. And Artemis is going to lie down on the manuscript because that's what cats do. They sleep on your manuscript. If you want to see her, she occasionally makes an entrance on Instagram. I'll probably take a picture of her later. I would, but I'm using the camera to film. Not for YouTube, but for Twitch. And there you go. All was revealed. Okay. Let's find out what happens. He was not unconscious, chapter 26. He was not unconscious for a long time. In fact, he was recovering as they finished binding his hands behind him. With much laughter and speculation on the eventual fate of the deputy, they slung him over the back of a horse. In town, they dumped him into an empty storehouse. They did not unbind him, but instead were careful to block up the door from the outside. He thought of the stone of escaping, which was in his belt, but decided to wait. His chances of survival in the hills, with his hands bound behind his back, were not good. If it should come about that they did not unbind him before they set about giving him the painful death that he was promised, he might have to risk it. Until that time, he would have patience. He was alone in the storehouse for some hours. They managed to get up and walk back and forth to keep from freezing. They came with a little bit of bread and water for him, untying his hands long enough for him to eat and drink, then tied him again. Lord Moel says to keep you alive until morning, when he will judge you. Laughing uproariously at that, they went away and left him to himself. Through the night, he did his best to keep from freezing. When they finally came to get him, however, he was almost glad they would likely be taking him to somewhere warm. Moel had taken to holding his court in the inn, that being the most spacious building in town. For this occasion, he had summoned all the important people of the town. Pyfrathor stood at the front, looking unhappy and discouraged about the entire affair, but looking above all, frightened. Moel had moved a table to the back of the walled in, and had set up a large chair on that. The chair bore a large selection of pillows and cushions, an obvious attempt to produce a comfortable throne. Moel stood atop this construction and looked ridiculous, but still dangerous for all that. Beside him stood Calgaich, the man from the hills, looking somewhat dangerous himself, as a person balanced between madness and sanity. The men who brought Ethan in pushed him forward to stand alone before the bandit chief. Then one of them stepped forward and cuffed him. "Kneel before the great Moel!" Ethan stubbornly kept his knees unbent, and the man struck him again. With his hands bound, he was unable to keep his balance and stumbled forward to his knees. He would have struggled to his feet again, but the same man stepped forward and laid heavy hands on his shoulders. "You only make it worse for yourself, fool," he muttered, then looked up at the man on the throne. The man who leads the opposition to your rule, Moel. Moel looked down at the deputy with scorn on his face. You are the simpleton who skulks in the bush, shooting futile arrows at my men? You are the outlaw who dares to stand against me? It is you, Moel, who are the outlaw. I still have the warrant of the king to serve as deputy, to put down the likes of you. Wrath came over Moel's face. Outlaw? I am lord of this town, and when I admit myself to the king in the springtime, then he will formally grant me the rule of this land, and any who stand against me will be outlaws. You, however, will not survive until then. The bandit leader made a sign to the man who had brought Ethan in. Set him over in the corner there, and let him watch what happens here. He may thus enjoy his last day on earth, knowing how thoroughly he has been defeated. So Ethan sat in the corner, watching Moel hold his court, watching him dispense what he called justice. There was a case of accusation of theft against one of his men. He heard the complainant, who carefully explained what had been done, who had done it, and when. Moel turned to the man who stood against whom the complaint had been made. What do you say then? The man bobbed his head toward Moel. Lord Moel, it be a bunch of lies. Why, I been one of your loyal men for years. Would I steal from this man? Moel then looked at the complainant. I think you are trying to cause trouble here, making accusations against the loyal warriors of my household. Go, and if you come before me with another such complaint, I shall have you soundly beaten for your incompetence. Sorry, for your impertinence. There was another case, however, of one of Moel's men having killed one of his comrades. The accused was brought forward. What have you to say to this charge? The man looked a little sullenly at Moel. Lord Moel, Damour, he accused me of stealing a gold bracelet from him, a bracelet he had promised me for a gambling debt. When he kept on about it, I told him that it was he who was the thief, since he was keeping what was rightly mine. He tried to draw his sword, but I got mine out first, and that was it. If you had a cause against this man for payment of debt, you should have brought it here. Have you had anything to say to that? It hardly seemed worth the trouble. I am the justice here, and he who seeks to make his own law takes a great risk. He turned to the jailers. Take him out and hang him. As a lesson to all, if there is a case for injustice, it is for me to judge rights and wrongs of it. Let all beware. There were a few more cases between citizens of the town, and these were settled in an offhand way by the bandit leader, often with little reference to the facts of the case. As things went on, Moel cast casual glances towards Ethan, who held an expression carefully blank. Moel at last made a decision. He summoned one of his men and then pointed at the deputy. Take him away and let him be carefully kept. We will give some thought of this matter of his death, and this evening he will die. Ethan considered the use of the stone once more, but decided to wait. If they unbound his hands, he would have a better chance. This evening would be soon enough to make his escape, if they did not lose his hands sooner. He smiled, considering the probable effect on the gathered people in Moel's court when the prisoner was brought in to be killed, then suddenly disappeared from among them. The storehouse was still cold, but Ethan had been allowed to get warm, and by rising and walking about, he managed to keep from getting too cold. His bound hands were a little painful, but he did his best to ignore them. It still lacked some hours of the evening when one of Moel's men came back to fetch him. You are wanted, he said tersely. Ah, Lord Moel is afraid to leave me unkilled, for I fear I might escape and do him harm? No, only that the witch demands to see you. Witch? Aye, you'll find out soon enough. A little while ago, an old woman with her manservant came into town to see Lord Moel. The guard would have sent her away, but it appears she cast some sort of spell on him, so he would only obey her command. The guard at the door to the hall attempted to stop her, but she expelled him as well. When she first came inside, Lord Moel, you have said, Lord Moel, yeah. When she first came inside, she said, Lord Moel, you have here a king's deputy. There are vast and powerful forces gathering because of these circumstances, and they may prove your destruction. Bring out the deputy so I may see him, and tell if he is indeed the man. Lord Moel sneered at her, and was about to shout to order his guards to slay her, when she made a gesture. His drinking cup shattered in his hand, and she said, Perhaps the next thing that breaks will be even harder to mend. Send for the king's deputy. Lord Moel is as brave as any, but he recognizes when powers greater than human are against him. So, here I am. The man marched Ethan rapidly to the inn and took him through the door. Inside was Moel on his throne. Numerous people, both of the town and of Moel's band, were there. Also present were a man and woman, wrapped in gray robes. They had been facing Moel, but as Ethan came in, they turned and faced him. He looked at them. There seemed something oddly familiar about the man, but he could not quite recognize him. Both are so wrinkled and old, he wondered that they could stand to travel. The woman moved toward him. Within arm's reach, looking closely in the eyes, she spoke quietly. Do you have the stone with you? Sorry, do you have the stone with you? She said it really quietly. His heart leaped, and he recognized Gael despite her disguise. He stood staring for a moment, then realized she was waiting for an answer from him. Yes, he said. She whirled, staring at Moel. It is the man. And there is one other matter. She inspected the people in the hall and then shook her head. Among your people, Lord Moel, is one of the people of the hills. He must be summoned. Summoned? Him? He comes and goes when he feels the need, and a summons from me means little to him. Sorry. Nevertheless, you shall send to him, and say that there is a wise woman who knows something of him, of his past, his sorrows, and his wishes to see him here. And wishes to see him here. Also, the things which will pass here are not for people of this town, aside from those who are of your own following. Dismiss the rest. Moel looked around, chose out a man from the crowd. Valor, go to the quarters of the stranger. Tell him that the message as the woman has given it, and bid him come here. Valor bobbed his head in a sketchy bow, then left. Moel chose out another man. Teldor, take 5 men and see to it that only our lot are here. Yes, Moel. Teldor took charge according to his orders, and soon the townsfolk were being sorted out and removed. Shortly after that had been done, Valor returned. Well, follower? He says he comes, Moel, but he's in a queer sort of mood. I'd be careful of him. I'm always careful of him, Valor, but I thank you for your concern for me. They all stood there then, uncomfortably, waiting, and at last the door opened, and Calgash came in. He paused inside the door, looking around, casting a searching glance at the old woman. He moved forward, reminding Ethan of a wild animal in the midst of his habitual prey, an animal which might suddenly and without warning spring and slay. What is this, Moel? The old one. She had you summoned. She has been speaking of portents and omens. He turned and spoke to Gael. All are present now. Say what it is you have to say. Gael nodded, then laughed a little. It is not much that I have things to say, as things to show. Gaelgaish, look! She pointed towards the fireplace, which blazed up brightly, resolved itself into pictures. All were looking in that direction, and Gaelish, surprised by the use of his name, looked at the fire as well. Ethan gasped. The scene was the scene he had seen that day, riding around the corner of the hill to find Moel and his men crowded around the woman. Moel's face was clear in the pictures, and a moment later, the face of the woman was also clear. Calgaish gave a shriek. Now, Ethan, use the stone! Gael was speaking, and Ethan noticed with surprise that she and the old man were at either side of him, holding his arms, though he had not seen them move. So engrossed had he been with the pictures in the fire, the man was at his side was speaking too rapidly, muttered words in some strange tongue, and Ethan realized the voice to be Raj's. Calgaish, whose shriek continued on and on, a sound of indescribable agony and madness, raised his arms as though pulling something down out of the air, and there was a glow around him. A glow around him. A glow that rapidly began to grow in brightness. Use the stone, Ethan, Gael shouted in his ear, and Ethan strove to obey. Again it was as he blinked slowly. There was a darkness, thick and deep, in the midst of which he seemed to hear a pulsating hum. Light came, brilliant, blinding, and he blinked several times. He was in a clearing in a forest, and Gael was standing at his side. Her face and figure returned to normal. He looked to the other side and saw Raj. I should have known it would be you, Raj. You have my gratitude, both of you. Raj grinned, working at the knots in the ropes around Ethan's wrists. She came for me knowing you'd been taken, and told me we had a chance to rescue you, but it meant a risk, as I wasn't sure whether she might hit me on the head or something with some on the oh my goodness. As I wasn't sure whether she might hit me on the head with something, I agreed. Ethan smiled back, turned turned again to Gael. What will become of Calgaish and those in the inn? She was pale and drawn, and he knew that she herself had suffered from having had to watch the anguish of her sister. It was all I could think of to do, to make Calgaish so angry that he would cease to think and only destroy. Under the circumstances, he and Moel will certainly be gone, burned to ash, as well as most of those in the hall. It may well be that the hall itself will be destroyed, and some of the buildings nearest to it. It is best that the power on which Calgaish drew will have destroyed the. It is possible that the power on which Calgaish drew will have destroyed the whole town, but I doubt that. Ethan nodded. But at the least, Moel is gone, and those of his men who are left will be disorganized. I must go back and find my young men to see to things. Moel's men, even without their leader, could be a nuisance, he sighed. I must go. You must? I still have a duty, but when it is seen to, I will return. You would return to me? He stopped a moment, realizing what he had said, then realized as well he meant every word of it. I will return to you, if you will have me. She laughed. If I will have you, did you think I came to bring you out of Moel's hall for mere friendship? I will wait for you, for so however long it will take. I will be waiting. Dun, dun, dun. Okay, well, that was kind of cool. Alrighty. And now, on to chapter 27. What? Okay. Ethan looked up from his field where he had just finished driving the last furrow through the dark soil. Duna behind him was dropping the seed in a small trench, which he had dug with a stick, while Janice came behind his father, kicking dirt over the seeds. They had finished seeding Duna's field yesterday, using the same procedures, and Lankasig was now helping Gael to cook for both families inside the small house by the hill. Over the hill came two men, armed and mounted, and Ethan put a hand to his sword. Behind the two came another, with a banner flying overhead, showing a griffin in flight. Duna, look! Duna looked up and saw the men come down the hill with more behind them. There in the midst was the figure of the king, imposing on a tall dark horse, marked out from the rest by a golden coronet. Marked out from the rest by a golden coronet atop his steel helm. Ethan, is it the king? Is it really he? It is. Do you not recognize him? Duna shook his head. I was a spearman in his army, but I did not come close to him myself. My views from him were from afar. The procession came towards the field, and Duna cast a hard glance at them. If they do not stop, they'll be trampling my field. Yes. Ethan strode to the edge of the plowed and seeded field, and faced the two men riding toward him. They continued toward him. Turn aside, please. The field is newly seeded. Turn aside, is it? Asked one, a tall, slender man with marks of it. Do you know who comes? Do you know who comes? Aye, the king comes. But I'd warned he would not ride heedless across new sown fields. From behind came a voice calling with a note of authority. Turn aside, Balsh. You will be trampling the fields in a moment. Balsh hesitated, then swung aside, moving on far enough to allow the rest of the procession to come over the hill and into the valley. The king himself, Doval the Fair, swung his horse out of line and stopped before Ethan and Duna. Ethan knelt immediately, and Duna was only a little slower. Rise, Ethan. It is necessary to talk, and we would talk better standing. Ethan rose, and Duna as well. Well, Ethan Braw's son, will you offer me the hospitality of your home? Such as it is, my lord king, it is yours to command. But I fear that food for so many will be hard to come by, and shelter impossible. The king leaped down from his horse and snorted. We did not come all this way to eat you out of house and home. We have brought our own provisions and tents. Would you at least invite your king to sit? Ethan blushed. Of course, my lord. My house is yours. Please come in. The king cast a glance over his shoulder and called to Balsh. See to setting up the tents and all, and stay off the fields. They walked to the house. As they walked to the house, Ethan remembered again that the king was shorter than he seemed. Shorter, indeed, than Ethan himself, and only a few years older, but habit and carriage made him seem larger and older. They entered the house, and Gael looked up. My lord kind, this is my... What? My lord king? Probably my lord king. Let's check that here. Hold on. I said it with such conviction, too. My lord king, this is my wife, Gael, and Lankasig, the wife of my neighbor, Duna. Gael, I think the king would like something to drink. It has no doubt been a tiring ride. The king himself settled himself gratefully on a chair, and took a long drink of ale offered to him by Gael, then looked up at Ethan. Sit, sit. How can we talk with you hovering up there like a hawk? That's better. You know, Ethan, this business of settling the peace is about thrice as difficult as the business of winning the war against the Kimratha. But you will know that we have heard a word of what you've been up against in this land. But why ever would you want to move so far out from the town? You could have saved your king a long ride. I regret, my lord king, that my wife is not welcome in the town. Indeed, she is not welcome in many of the farms locally. Therefore, I chose to make my farm out here, near to that of my friend Duna. King Doval, cast a quick glance at Gael and then looked again. He looked back at Ethan with a question on his face. Aye, my lord, she is one of the dwellers within the house. It seems, then, that you shall have a story to tell me. Begin with your arrival here, and leave nothing out. When the story was done, the king had already been fed, and several of his retinue were seated or standing around listening. So in the end, Ethan, the inn was destroyed, and the few of Moel's men who survived fled. So in the end, Ethan, the inn was destroyed. The few of Moel's men who survived fled into the wilds, where they were tracked down by your young men, and you have chosen to take up a farming life out here. Yes, my lord. Ethan, as I have said to you, this creating of peace is more difficult than the war ever was. I need good men, even good men who dare to take wives from the hills where no man goes. Will you not continue to be my man, to ride the troubled lands and bring the king's law? My lord, I would do so, but I have found a place for myself, and I would stay here. Wandering is fine enough for a young man whose home and town have been destroyed, whose family is no more. For a man with a wife, it is not a good thing. I regret I must refuse you. The king frowned. I feared as much, but I cannot let a good man be wasted in these years. So I must put you to work. No, no, he waved a hand. I will not put you to deputying unwilling. But there is another way you may serve me. You recall that Moel was intending to set himself up as the baron, to send taxes and tithes and promise to uphold those laws? Though you have destroyed Moel, there is still the need of a baron in for these parts. Ethan opened his mouth to protest, but King Dovel spoke again. Nope, I will not have no for an answer to this request, Ethan Braw's son. You are my baron, and that will be the end of it. After all, you have already raised a formidable force of household warriors, most of whom would only be too happy to continue serving you. You also know most of the hiding places in the area, so bandits would have a great deal of difficulty remaining hidden in your barony. You are my baron, you see. It is only a matter of how well you do your job. The king looked at Gael, smiling, then turned back to Ethan again. I will hope to see yourself and your wife at court at the midsummer feast. fast forward it a bit. Okay, so I was wrong. There's not actually a chapter 28, but there is an epilogue. Even though that sounded like an epilogue, it's not an epilogue. Anyway, I I told you that this is very rough and I have to work on it. So did Athenbra's son, become a baron in the kingdom of Serenigos, and he served his king well during the days of his life. His son served after him, and his son as well, and the three gifts were possession of the oldest son, who was told their history and use. He was never forgotten in the family of Athen. The blood of the folk of the hills ran in their veins, and there was a friendship between that family and the folk of the hills, so long as the memory lasted. Hmm. Dun dun dun. Okay, anyway, so that's the story. Um, yeah, I think overall, yes, I like it. It's shorter. Um, I don't know that it would be get much longer than the 40,000 it is. But I do need to like polish it a bit. And that last chapter really, really jumps a lot. So I don't really. I think maybe just. I don't think the epilogue needs to be there really because it's kind of its own. It's its own thing. The epilogue, I guess. Anyway, yeah, so that was everything for this story. Like I said, I'm going to be doing some like structural re-editing for it. Probably going to read it again, like myself read it and put down some notes. Although I think I have most of the most of what I need in there. Yeah, shorter but sweet. I mean, I really liked it and had a kind of a kind of nice little ending there. Yeah, I don't know. What did you guys think about it? Feel free to leave the comments where you can. And what's going to happen now is, this is a wrap up, right? So it's time for me to kind of say what I'm going to be working on. Because I had already read uh, the saga of Harem, and then for 40 ponies, for 40 silver ponies, that title, oh my goodness, it's gonna kill me. That was also only half the story, which I kind of want to finish that story. But there's so many stories I have of his that I just want to write stories for. So I kind of have to I have project upon project upon project. So that means I have to start finishing some other ones before I can start putting more on my plate. I'm probably going to leave notes for myself so that I can figure out what kind of like a little to-do list for myself so that I know what to do when I pick up the manuscript again. Yeah. It was, I don't know. If I to put it on a scale, I I mean, I like all of his stories because they all have their own little. I think my favorite so far between between the Guardian of the Sword and the Aventure series, which has its own special place in my heart. Then I'd also say that the Saga of Harem was also one of my favorites, just because I really just the story itself. And I think for 40 Silver Ponies will be great once I've gotten it. I have an idea of where the story goes, where he originally wanted to go with it, and I'm just gonna like amp it a little bit up, and finish that off. Um, I even have an idea for that, a secondary idea for that. But maybe talk to you guys about that later. Um, so now what happens is I might go into repeats a little bit. So May, I'm gonna be taking off the rest of April and all of May. So I might pop in here and there and say hi to you guys. Maybe do some like studio studio videos or whatever. Um, but my next story, I I think I might actually just do some repeats because I need to get some stories. I need to get these older stories that needed to be edited more. They need to get finished so I can publish them this year because they've been sitting for like 4 years now. Yeah, 4 years. So I need to get those done so that I can get them out the door because they just some of them just need a couple, the two of them just need a little bit of tweaking, and then some need a little bit more. Um, I would love to say the deputy and the gifts. It would be like able to go right out the be able to go right out there too, except that yeah, except for it just needs a lot of editing. I have to review it. I have to reread it again. There's just so much to it. So I'm gonna take some time and yeah, I'll probably check in. I mean, you might catch me. What I might just do is I might read some poetry, but it'll be like a one-off thing. And what I'll do is let's see here. I can post on YouTube and I can post figuring out learning stuff is what I'm doing right now. Learning stuff. I will post to both channels, letting you know when I'm planning on doing like a poem night. And it sounds like I am being summoned, so I will let you all go. Thank you all for tuning in. I really, really appreciate it. And guess what? I'm going to announce it now. Is that pre-orders should be up for the Saga of Harem. So if you are interested in listening to and reading the story that I was telling you earlier, back back when, back in January. Oh my goodness, like way back. Feels like a million years already. But yeah, when I was reading back in January, well then that book is going on sale at the end of the month. And yeah, pre-orders are up pretty much wherever you can buy books. That is both paperback and ebook. So feel free to pop on by. And oh wait, let's see here. I can do better. Hold on. Now I have to like get up and get away for a quick second here. Whoop. There you go. Bum, bum, bum. Yeah, it. I don't know. Try and like catch it up. Anyway, that is the Saga of Harem, and it is on pre-order. So if you're interested, pick it up. And yeah, that's all I have to say. I'm just going to start babbling now. Um, I will talk to you all again soon. Well, eventually. Like I said, taking some time, and I'll post when I start doing some poem reading. So talk to you then. And oh, and also I will let you guys know because I'm going to be working on a story. I'll let you know what story it is and when it's going to start up. It'll be starting up at the beginning of June, just so you all can. But like the week before, the last week of May, I'll post and let you know what story I've chosen, and also because it's going to be between two stories. It's either going to be A Voice in the Dark or The Sword and the Rose, and those are both stories that I've already read on this channel. But I'm going to be doing I need to do some active editing and, like, writing while I'm doing it so that I can like, actively change it out. So that's gonna be a little more intensive, but it'll be worth it because those books will get actually published instead of me saying I'm gonna publish them and not. Because you guys, or at least me posting this every night, helps me kind of want to, like, it gives me that extra little drive to go out and start, like, editing or writing or whatever. So, thank you everybody who tuned in, and I will talk to everybody in June, and maybe a little before that, but at least at the very latest, I'll be back in June. Talk to you then. Good night.